Well, hello there, beautiful. Welcome to my tutorial and theory video about Five Nights at Freddy's. I will be simultaneously demonstrating how to make a puppet pendant like the one that I'm holding, and I will be talking about my theory of the timeline and the identity of some of the contentious characters. All right. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm doing here is just showing you the outline of my sketch and the colors that I'll be using, which will be red, black, and white clay, and some purple mica powder for the streams, the two lines that go from the eyes down to the top of the mouth. For this design, I decided to do a flat black silhouette in the back with a curved mask over the top to give it some dimensionality, so you'll see me doing that. So the first thing that I need to say about my theory about the game is that it hinges on the idea that Phone Guy is an unreliable narrator. This means that we can't take everything that he says at face value. That may seem obvious, but there are some ways in which I think he is doing it malevolently, in that he aligns himself with management more than employees, and I think that he was complicit with Fazbear Corporation in the cover-up of the murder of these children. But also, I think that there's a level on which Phone Guy doesn't seem to want to accept what he knows to be true about these animatronics, and so there is that level of deceit as well, that he minimizes things, he minimizes the danger and the strangeness to the player in an attempt to soothe himself and justify his decisions and his actions. So this is a horror story about a serial killer's cruelty and torture of children, and it's also a horror story about a corporation covering up crimes, denying knowledge, and protecting its bottom line above all else. Because despite the restaurant losing money and suffering casualties every time it reopens, the Fazbear Corporation never stops trying to turn both a blind eye and a profit, possibly all the way through to the third game if one assumes that there would need to be some level of rights acquisition to use the Fazbear name in the Haunted House title. So my theory is that Golden Freddy is the original animatronic from Fredbear's, that Springtrap would be equivalent to Golden Bonnie, another original animatronic from Fredbear's. And okay, so back to my sculpture for a minute. You can see I've made a second silhouette that's slightly larger than the black one, and I'm just curling around the edge to round it out into a mask shape. The next thing I'm going to do is trace the facial features that I want to cut out, which is the two eyes and the mouth, onto the back. And then cut those pieces out and smooth around the edges. We see them together in one of the mini-games from the latest game, Five Nights 3. So the story begins at Fredbear's Family Diner, and I'm not sure exactly what timeline that is in. I have dates for the other ones. Fredbear's Family Diner is the origin of the Freddy and Bonnie suits, the yellow Freddy and Bonnie suits, that is. If we interpret the Take the Cake to the Children minigame as being a reliable representation of the restaurant's layout, then it looks to be a very small one-room diner. But with the addition of the minigames from Five Nights 3, I'm not so sure now whether that's reliable, because some of the Five Nights 3 minigames take place in locations that are already known to have multiple rooms, but that are depicted as a single bounded square for their frame. So... but in the minigame, we see the first child who is murdered outside the restaurant by Purple Guy. I believe that that is the child who is haunting the puppet, as evidenced by the puppet jump scare at the end of the minigame. I believe that the story continues at a previous location of Freddy Fazbear's, where the rest of the children's murders took place in 1985. Now, I think that because 1985 to 2015 equals 30 years. 30 years later was one of the taglines for Five Nights 3, and the big reveal in Five Nights 3 is also the death of Purple Guy inside Springtrap. So one of the things that Phone Guy says in the recovered tapes, the training tapes, is that the classic suits are being retired to an appropriate location. I believe that the classic suits here refers to Golden Freddy and Golden Bonnie. The appropriate location is the safe room that he talks about, a room that is out of the line of sight of the security cameras. It's not known to customers. It is not on the animatronics program. So Phone Guy also says, until replacements arrive, you will wear the temporary costumes provided to you. Keep in mind they were found on very short notice, so questions about appropriateness or relevance should be deflected. I believe that this is the introduction of Foxy and Chica, because appropriateness and relevance. So if it's Fredbear's Family Diner or Freddy Fazbear's, and they add these new characters, they need new suits on very short notice, because they've had the discovery that these classic suits are not safe. The replacements also explains Freddy versus Golden Freddy, because Freddy and Bonnie, the blue version of Bonnie and the dark brown version of Freddy, are the replacement animatronics that were modeled after the dangerous and unusable classic originals, or the golden versions. I also believe that it is at this previous location where the 5 children were murdered. Classic Freddy's endoskeleton was removed, and that naked endoskeleton can sometimes be seen in Pry's corner. I believe that belonged to classic or golden Freddy. Purple Guy wore the empty suit to lure the children into the safe room. I think this is the origin of Golden Freddy, that the wires that are hanging out of the suit are because of a very rough and violent disassemblage, that Purple Guy yanked that endoskeleton out of the suit. Purple Guy hides the bodies inside the suits while inside the safe room so that there is no record of their disappearance. I believe that the puppet imbued the animatronics with the spirits of the dead children at this point, but then the restaurant closed down, and that all of the animatronics and the restaurant itself were left to rot for a long time, as Phone Guy put it, with all of the bodies left inside. The Fazbear Corporation decided to close this location long enough for the evidence to deteriorate, and they plan to reopen it in a few years. So 2 years later, the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's opens in 1987. This is the restaurant that appears in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Now, I believe that the Follow Me minigames are depictions of the animatronics attempting to return to the safe room, and that Shadow Freddy is a ghost of their memory of the murderer, i.e. of Purple Guy inside the Freddy suit, and therefore Purple Freddy. Purple Guy has been rehired at this new restaurant in 1987, and when the animatronics follow him to the safe room, he dismantles them because they're trying to expose the crimes that he committed. So Phone Guy says, by now I'm sure you've noticed the older models sitting in the back room. Those are from the previous location. We just use them for parts now. The idea was originally to retrofit them, but they're so ugly. Ugh, and the smell. That's from night 1 of Five Nights 2. So the new animatronics are programmed with facial recognition and plugged into a predator database. I don't think at this point in the timeline that Phone Guy knows that Purple Guy is the predator, and that he's been rehired as the new night guard. I believe that Purple Guy is the night guard before the player, and that he wants to be alone in the restaurant so that he can recover evidence from the safe room and destroy it to protect himself. But the animatronics recognize Purple Guy, and they immediately set to getting into the office to attack him. Phone Guy tells you that the first night guard complained about conditions and was moved to the day shift. He said that animatronics tried to get into the office. Phone Guy claims that that should be impossible. I think that Phone Guy may at this point know that that is actually not the case, that people are in danger, and that these suits are vicious, but at this point that he's just covering all of it up as well. Then Phone Guy starts talking about rumors that are going around and says, no, however tragic, they have nothing to do with this restaurant. Our day guard reports nothing out of the ordinary. Well, of course he wouldn't. He's Purple Guy. At first I thought that this was an indication of the 5 murders taking place in this restaurant at this point, but now I believe this to be a bit of a red herring. Maybe they found some other evidence? It could have simply been that Purple Guy was tampering with the recognition systems, and that alone was starting to cause problems, and they didn't realize it until shortly thereafter, which I'll get to in just a moment. So then Phone Guy tells us that there's an investigation going on and that we may have to end up closing the restaurant for a few days. That's what leads me to believe that this is not the original murders. If there were missing children presumed to be dead, an investigation would not lead to just a few days of a closed restaurant, and it wouldn't be a may. It would be an is. the restaurant would be closed, and for more than a few days. I think that something strange happened or something turned up, but it's not the original case. To jump back over to my sculpture for a second, you can see that I've also pulled out some black mica powder, which I didn't think I was going to be using when I set out my materials at the beginning, but after I polished up all of those edges, I thought it would make it look even more eerie and sort of give it more depth and also more of a hollow look if I put mica powder just along those smoothed edges. I also believe the rumors may be that the unsolved missing children from a couple of years ago these stories were resurfacing. So then Film Guy tells us that someone has tampered with the recognition systems and that the animatronics are acting unusual and almost aggressive towards staff. Towards kids they're fine, but with adults they just stare. So he also says someone used the suits in the back and now none of them are acting right. I think Purple Guy used the yellow suit. So now I'm just lightly sketching where I'm going to put the upper and lower lips, the round red cheeks, and giving myself some very light lines for where I'm going to aim that purple mica powder for the 2 streaks down the face. The building then goes on lockdown. Phone Guy makes a point of mentioning especially previous employees. Purple Guy, a former employee, returned, got back into the suit, and was trying to relive the experience. The day shift is now available. Purple Guy has been fired. Phone Guy says he's trying to contact the original restaurant owner of Fred Bear's Family Diner, that it's been closed for years. Phone Guy then tells you that there's one more event scheduled, a birthday. To wear your uniform, stay close to characters, and don't let them hurt anybody. This, I believe, is when the Bite of 87 happens, when our protagonist is mistaken for Purple Guy because of the uniform and tampered facial recognition. So the ghosts leave the animatronics in order to pass into the invisible room. Purple Guy sees them, and he runs and hides inside Golden Bonnie, even though he knows he probably shouldn't. Other people have interpreted his movement inside the suit as laughter. I saw it as heavy, frightened breathing, the same way we hear the protagonist breathing heavily inside the Freddy mask. I believe that it's that breathing on the mechanism that loosens the spring and kills him. Phone Guy mentions, do not breathe on the mechanism. Phone Guy is complicit with management, and he has this covered up, as he announces in the tape that they've decided to seal up the room, and he's not very specific why. I think they know exactly why. They decide to have the safe room sealed with Springtrap inside. The previous day guard is framed and convicted, but the restaurant can't overcome the bad press on top of the remaining bad PR of the Fred Bear's murder a few years ago, and so the restaurant closes after it's unable to find a buyer. That is specifically mentioned. The new animatronics are scrapped, and the old animatronics are kept to be refurbished. This then leads us into the events of the very first game at Freddy Fazbear's in 1993. There's some things you can look up online about how 1993 was reached. It has to do with the amount of money that you make across the week and the minimum wage and those sorts of things, and the date. So animatronics are refurbished and placed in the new restaurant, and the ghosts re-inhabit them with the puppets' help. This I got from the cutscenes where Freddy is looking out of the Fredbear out of the mask in the Five Nights 1 restaurant and looks to the left and the right. And this happens a couple of times. The first time, neither of the other 2 animatronics have moved, and you get an error. I believe that that's an indication of them just starting to reawaken inside the suits. The next cutscene has them looking at each other, and it says, "It's me." In this instance, I think that "it's me" could be interpreted as them regaining consciousness as ghosts, that they are waking back up and remembering what happened. Then the other 2 animatronics have moved, and Golden Freddy appears in front of you a couple of times. I think that's a flashback, remembering the trauma that comes back to them, and Golden Freddy is in their face. But then the puppet shows up and is right in front of your face, and he can't move away from it. I actually think, after I've constructed my whole theory, that the puppet is not malevolent. I think the puppet is actually trying to help the ghosts of the children bring Purple Guy to justice in one way or another. That the first time that the puppet tried, it was to simply put the spirits into the suits in the same way that the ghost of that child had haunted the puppet itself. And that all of them teamed up to confront Purple Guy, and they ended up running him inside the Springtrap costume, and he died. Instead of that bringing him to justice, it was covered up, and so they still couldn't rest. So the phone guy works the night shift at Five Nights at Freddy's 1, and the puppets and the animatronics recognize him, and they all join together to kill him on his last night. That's why you hear all of the different kill noises in his phone call, because all of them team up together to storm into his office, because he was complicit multiple times and has now come back to work here yet again. Then they begin their attempts to bring Springtrap's existence to someone's attention through whatever means necessary. I think it's interesting to note that the music that plays on Freddy's music box is a song from Bizet's opera Carmen called the Toreador song, and the lyrics to the chorus, which is the music that plays, is Toreador on guard, and dream away, dream in combat, that a dark eye is watching you, and that love is waiting for you. I believe that the puppet's ghost has been haunting this restaurant for 30 years. The puppet is the dark eye that's keeping a watch on the ghosts of the other children, and a resolution of their murders and justice, even if it's only justice in death, is the love that is waiting for them. I'm not saying that I think necessarily that Scott chose the song with the intention that the lyrics would be interpreted. I just find it really neat that they can be. In a similar way, the music that plays on the puppet's music box is a song called My Grandfather's Clock, which is a song about a tall clock that was bought on the same day that his grandfather was born, that it ticked away the hours of his life, and that when he died, the lyrics say, it stopped short, never to go again when the old man died. So again, there's a theme of a person being attached to a mechanical object. So I think both song choices are really either intentionally or unintentionally amazing and really appropriate. And I'd like to think that they were intentional choices on Scott's part, because the rest of this game is so beautifully constructed. All right, I hope that theory made sense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down below. I'm curious to see what kind of challenges you might have to some of my theories. A lot of this is, I think he kept the storyline intentionally vague so that it could stir up everyone's imagination. A lot of this, I really tried to say, I believe, or I think, or my version, or the way I like to think about it, because I'm not saying that this is the only way that it could be. I'm not even saying that this is the way Scott thinks it could be. I'm just, this is the storyline that I have pulled out of the amazing and deeply affecting clues and story that Scott provided. So these games really caught my imagination and really scared me. This was a really scary story, but I like my interpretation that the puppet is actually in some ways a protector character. That maybe instead of the antagonist, that the puppet is more of a deuteragonist, which is like a fancy term for not necessarily a character in direct opposition to the protagonist, but whose desires may be at cross purposes with the protagonist. So the puppet's main purpose really is not to take care of the player, it's to take care of those children who no one else took care of. And so in some ways, I think that the puppet may be the most meaningful character in the game to me, which is why I decided to do this sculpt first. I'm thinking about doing some other Five Nights at Freddy's sculpts, so if there are any other characters you would really like to see, my suspicion is I'd really like to do Foxy the Pirate next, because I always liked Foxy. I'm kind of like Phone Guy that way. But if you have any requests, please let me know. And there will be more Let's Plays coming and more Let's Clays. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure making this little sculpture and theory video for you in the future. That just about wraps it up for this episode, with just enough time left for me to say, ciao for now.